ready for this. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It really is.
Thank you so much.
I'll see you again.
I'm sure you will. She's so sweet. Girl is open your job. What? Dana, you're so vulgar. She was like checking you out. I order from them all the time. That's probably why. But she is the only one who ever delivers me food. I'm sure it's no.
Scene 2 unfolds as a quietly devastating study of vulnerability, persuasion, and the search for safety within a world that offers young women very few options for being cared for without cost. And when viewed through a queer and feminist lens, it becomes less about the surface circumstances of risk and more about the emotional architecture that binds Skin and Presley together as they navigate fear, ambition, and longing. The scene opens in a modest, uncomfortable space that immediately signals impermanence and precarity, a place that does not promise rest so much as survival, and Skin's apology for the room functions as an apology for the life they are currently living, one defined by compromise and the constant hope that something better lies just beyond the next decision. Presley's nervousness is not framed as naivete, but as an embodied awareness of danger, an intuition that recognizes how thin the line is between agency and coercion, and her fear carries the weight of many women's experiences of being told that discomfort is simply the price of growth. Skin responds to this fear with reassurance that is both tender and troubling, offering confidence, compliments, and promises, a future luxury, as a way to quiet Presley's anxiety. And in doing so, she occupies a role that blends protector, motivator, and manipulator in ways that are emotionally complex rather than villainous. Their dialogue reveals a dynamic in which Skin has assumed the position of the more experienced partner, someone who has learned how to survive by understanding the expectations of men and the transactional nature of power, and she passes this knowledge on to Presley not as cruelty, but as pragmatism, reflecting how marginalized women often mentor each other into systems that exploit them, because those systems appear to be the only available routes to autonomy. Presley's fear that she might be used, and her need for Skin's promise to be there afterward, underscores how deeply relational her sense of safety is, suggesting that what she truly seeks is not money or adventure, but reassurance that she will not be abandoned once she crosses a line she cannot uncross. Skin's insistence that this is about us rather than individual gain reframes the situation as a shared project, a chosen family strategy for escape, which resonates strongly with queer histories of survival, where intimacy and economic necessity become entwined. From a lesbian perspective, the scene is particularly striking in how the most emotionally charged relationship is not between the young women and the unseen male presence, but between Skin and Presley themselves, whose bond is defined by trust, fear, persuasion, and an intimacy that exists largely in conversation, glances, and shared dreams. The men are abstracted into a faceless system, interchangeable and emotionally irrelevant, while the real stakes of the scene revolve around whether Skin can be trusted to hold Presley's fear with care rather than dismiss it. This dynamic reflects a broader cultural reality in which women are often socialized to manage their own and each other's vulnerability within patriarchal structures, learning to speak the language of confidence and inevitability even when they are deeply unsure. Skin's monologue about men being owed everything and women feeling guilty reveals an acute awareness of gendered power, and her cynicism reads not as bitterness but as a hard-earned defense against disappointment, one that queer women may recognize as the emotional armor developed after repeated lessons about whose desires are prioritized. Presley's question about whether Skin is using her introduces a moment of ethical reckoning that the scene treats with seriousness, acknowledging the possibility of exploitation without simplifying the answer, and Skin's response, rooted in shared feeling and mutual recognition, complicates any easy judgment. Their connection is framed as emotionally real even as it exists within a morally compromised situation, challenging audiences to hold empathy for women making constrained choices without romanticizing the harm those choices can entail. The scene's tension lies in this refusal to offer purity or clarity, instead presenting intimacy as something that can coexist with fear, hope, and contradiction. For queer women, there is a painful familiarity in watching two women negotiate safety and ambition in a world that offers them conditional acceptance at best, and in seeing how emotional bonds can become lifelines even when they are strained by unequal experience or differing thresholds for risk. The language Skin uses to encourage Presley to grow up mirrors societal narratives that equate maturity with self-sacrifice and endurance, particularly for women, and the film invites viewers to question whose definition of adulthood is being enforced and at what cost. Presley's hesitation, rather than being framed as weakness, emerges as a form of emotional intelligence, an awareness of her own limits that the world repeatedly pressures her to override. The later moments in the scene, where Presley is guided and instructed, are handled with restraint in the film's broader context, emphasizing not physicality but the psychological weight of being observed, evaluated, and shaped by external expectations. And this experience can be read metaphorically as a stand-in for how young women are often taught to perform versions of themselves that feel increasingly distant from their inner truth. Skin's promise of future freedom, symbolized by imagined travel and ease, echoes a classic narrative of escape that is particularly potent within queer communities, where the idea of somewhere else has long functioned as both hope and illusion. The phrase about feeling like something caged, wanting release, captures the emotional core of the scene, articulating a longing for selfhood that has been deferred, managed, and constrained. And this longing is not directed toward any specific person, but toward the possibility of living without fear. In this sense, the scene is less about transgression than about the human cost of systems that leave women choosing between safety and authenticity, between immediate survival and long-term well-being. The relationship between Skin and Presley illustrates how queer intimacy can provide profound emotional grounding, even when it cannot fully protect against structural harm, and how love between women often carries the additional burden of being a refuge from a world that refuses to care for them. The film's refusal to sensationalize their situation allows the audience to focus on the quiet negotiations of trust, responsibility, and desire that define their bond, and it insists on seeing these women as subjects rather than spectacles. By centering their interior lives, the narrative critiques a culture that is more comfortable judging women's choices than interrogating the conditions that shape them. And it asks viewers, particularly women and LGBTQ+ audiences, to recognize the resilience required simply to imagine a future beyond the present moment. Scene 2 thus operates as a poignant meditation on how women seek care and guidance from each other in the absence of reliable institutional support, how mentorship can blur into control when survival is at stake, and how emotional intimacy between women can be both a source of strength and a site of profound ethical complexity. It reflects the persistent discomfort society has with acknowledging the seriousness of women's bonds, especially when those bonds do not fit neatly into categories of innocence or respectability, and it challenges that discomfort by insisting that these relationships deserve the same nuance, compassion, and moral attention as any other. Ultimately, the scene contributes to a larger conversation about visibility and truth, reminding viewers that women's love for one another, whether romantic, aspirational, or rooted in shared survival, is not a deviation from meaningful human connection, but one of its most enduring and necessary forms, deserving of care, understanding, and the space to be seen without distortion or shame.